We're diving depth today into something that feels, well, it feels both critical and, frankly, a bit slippery for a lot of leaders. And that's how to build and maintain a real, authentic employee connection, especially now in a world where your desk might be your kitchen table and your team is spread all over the place. It's just a fundamental shift, you know? The old contract was simple: show up, do the work, get the paycheck. That's just,
Right.
it's over now. People are choosing where they work based on where they feel like they actually belong.
And that feeling of belonging, or the lack of it, has a real hard cost. The research we looked at paints a really stark picture. It shows that 27% of fully remote workers, 27%, and 23% of hybrid employees say they feel actively lonely at work. And when those crucial emotional bonds start to break, you see an immediate impact. Collaboration slows right down, knowledge sharing just stops. And the big one, turnover really accelerates.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for you today is pretty simple. We want to move past the sort of vague idea of a good culture and really zero in on the mechanics, the actionable, evidence-based stuff. We've synthesized 10 proven strategies that HR leaders, that managers can use like right now to strengthen that connection across all these dispersed workplaces. We're looking for measurable gains in morale, in retention, in productivity. And it has to be based on intentional design, not just, happy accidents.
Right. And to set the table correctly, we really have to start with clarity. Because in a lot of our sources, the whole concept of connection gets misused. It's often just lumped in with engagement.
Mm-hmm.
But employee connection, that's the foundation of real working relationships. It's that sense of belonging. It's the trust, the emotional bonds that truly make a person feel part of the team and the mission.
Okay, that's a great distinction. So if connection is about the relationships, that feeling of belonging, the who and the why, how does that practically differ from engagement? Because, most companies spend a huge amount of time and money measuring engagement scores.
Engagement is the how. That's the key difference. It's all about the employee's motivation, their enthusiasm for the work itself. Are they excited about their tasks? Are they putting in that discretionary effort? Connection, on the other hand, is the I belong here. It's about psychological safety, trust in your leaders, alignment with the company's purpose. And while they definitely reinforce each other, a connected employee is almost always an engaged one. You can have a very engaged employee who is super productive but feels completely isolated. And that person is a massive retention risk.
That distinction is so important, the functional motivation versus the human foundation. But let's be real for a second. Why is this so much harder now than it was, say, 5 years ago when most of us were in an office?
Because the default mechanism for connection proximity is just gone. Connection in a traditional office, it happened. It happened naturally. Shared commutes, overhearing a problem being solved across the cubicles, bumping into a peer at the coffee machine. For distributed and hybrid teams, you lose all of that organic spontaneity. So now, connection requires a deliberate, really organized design and, this is critical, the right mobile-first tech infrastructure. You have to make sure that physical distance doesn't become organizational distance.
That makes so much sense. The shift from a passive culture to an active strategy becomes mandatory, not optional. Okay, let's pivot to the application then. These 10 strategies we pulled from the research, we've grouped them into thematic clusters to make them a bit easier to digest. Let's start with the ones focused on informal relationships, basically. Designing those water cooler moments that used to be accidental.
Yeah.
Exactly. Strategy number 1 is create meaningful social interactions beyond formal meetings. Think about it. If all your interactions are task-focused, a stand-up, a project review, a status update, you will never build real rapport. We have to intentionally design these opportunities for unstructured interaction.
And it has to feel authentic, right, not forced. I think we've all been in those mandatory, super awkward online team building things. The courses really emphasize creating these low-pressure, high-frequency moments, like virtual coffee chats where, the camera can stay off if someone wants, or dedicated Slack channels for non-work stuff, hobbies, pets, whatever, or even just a quick 15-minute team trivia game to kick off the week. The goal is genuine human connection, not just forced fun. Precisely. You're nurturing the space for people to connect as people first, colleagues second. And this idea also extends to bridging gaps inside the organization, which brings us to strategy number 7. Implement structured mentorship programs. The research confirms that these kinds of cross-level, cross-department relationships, they create incredibly durable bonds and really expand people's professional networks.
That sounds great in theory, but I've seen so many mentorship programs that just fizzle out after the first meeting. What does the evidence say makes a difference between a successful program and one that's just, a paperwork burden?
Our sources point to 3 critical things. One, the organization has to provide real training for the mentors. Skills like active listening, how to give effective feedback. You can't just expect them to know how to do it. Two, you need thoughtful matching. Use HR tools, maybe even AI, to match pairs based on complementary skills or career goals, not just their job titles. And three, there has to be organizational support. You have to formalize the time for these meetings. If the business doesn't make time for connection, it sends a clear signal that the relationship isn't really valued.
That's huge. It transforms mentorship from just a nice idea into a real mechanism for organizational cohesion. Okay, let's move to our second cluster. This one is about clarity, alignment, and growth. These are the strategies that answer that big question. Why am I even doing this? Go. Strategy number 2 is encourage open and frequent communication.
Connection is just. It's fundamentally dependent on context. Your employees need to understand the big picture. What's happening in the company? Why are strategic shifts being made? And critically, how does my specific work contribute to those larger goals? When communication is siloed or, infrequent, employees feel disconnected from the mission, even if they really like their immediate team.
And this becomes a massive technical problem for companies with like frontline workforces, manufacturing staff, hospital workers, retail employees, people who are almost never at a laptop. The sources really highlight the specialized need for mobile-first communication tools, push notifications, SMS, internal apps designed to make sure that company-wide updates actually reach every single employee instantly.
That visibility is absolutely key. And building on that idea, strategy number 3 is to promote cross-functional collaboration. Organizational silos, they are fatal to connection. They just kill it because they restrict empathy. When teams only ever talk internally, they completely lose sight of the organization's overall needs.
So what does that look like in practice, beyond just telling people to work together better?
It means creating formal structures that basically mandate that connection. This could be short-term project teams or rotational assignments where an employee shadows another department for a week. Or cross-functional innovation committees. When someone from engineering works directly with marketing, they don't just share skills. They build real empathy and expand their internal networks. It makes the whole organization feel smaller and, frankly, more manageable.
And strategy number 5 is all about mutual investment. Invest in shared learning and development.
Shared learning creates shared context. It creates common ground. If your teams go through cohort-based training or coaching circles or skills workshops together, they build these support networks that last way beyond any single project. And also making sure you acknowledge and recognize when people complete certifications or mentor someone. That reinforces a culture of growth. When you learn together, you grow together. You build a stronger bond. It's that simple.
Okay, so we've covered proactive outreach, shared growth, but none of that is going to matter if the ground beneath the team isn't stable. Let's shift to the third cluster, which is all about building cultural safety. This is the absolute prerequisite for any of this to work. Strategy number 6 is the big one. Build a foundation of trust and psychological safety.
You just can't. You cannot build connection in a culture that's dominated by fear. If your employees are worried about making a mistake or facing punishment for an honest opinion, they're just going to retreat. They'll share less, and their connections will be purely transactional.
Can you define psychological safety for us and maybe give a real-world example of where it breaks down?
Sure. Psychological safety is that confidence that you can ask questions, that you can admit you made a mistake, that you can offer a dissenting opinion and take a calculated risk, all without facing punishment or embarrassment or damage to your career. Where it fails is so often at the leadership level. Let's say a leader rolls out a new policy and asks any concerns, but then the very first person who speaks up gets cut off or their concern is publicly minimized. In that one moment, that leader has just invalidated every single connection strategy they've invested in. Leaders build safety by responding constructively to failure and by actively acknowledging their own uncertainties.
That makes it a leadership competency then, not just an HR thing.
Yeah.
Which leads right into strategy number 8, which tackles the actual human capacity for connection. Prioritize holistic employee wellness.
An overwhelmed employee is a disconnected employee. It's that simple. When people are exhausted, they just don't have the emotional energy or the bandwidth needed to build and maintain relationships. And wellness support has to be comprehensive. It's got to go way beyond gym memberships. We're talking about flexible work options, robust mental health resources, realistic workload management that comes from the top down, and clear, authentic encouragement to disconnect and recharge.
And finally, strategy 9, which really needs to be woven through everything we've talked about. Champion diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. DEIB.
This is not negotiable, absolutely essential. If employees feel excluded or invisible because of their identity, they cannot by definition feel connected or form authentic relationships at work. DEIB initiatives aren't separate projects running on the side. They are the intentional design required to ensure the culture you're building is fundamentally inclusive and safe for everyone.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because among all 10 of those strategies, the data is just crystal clear. Recognition stands out. It is the single most powerful, high-leverage tool you have for building connection. Let's zoom in on strategy 4, make recognition, a strategic cultural practice, and number 10, celebrate milestones.
The focus on recognition is completely justified by the impact, by the numbers. Strategic recognition platforms report that employees who get recognized at least once a month are 84% more likely to feel strong connections with their colleagues. 84%. And just as critically, they are 87% more likely to feel known as individuals at their company. Recognition literally shifts the culture from being just transactional getting tasks done to being about shared, meaningful achievement.
But the quality of that recognition has to matter, right? The big critique I always hear is that these programs become generic, just an automated happy birthday email. What does the source material define as effective recognition?
Effective recognition has to be 5 things. It must be timely delivered close to the actual achievement, not 6 months later at a review. It has to be specific. It needs to say exactly what the person did and what impact it had. It should be values aligned, connecting the action back to a core company value. It should be public when it's appropriate, so the impact is visible to everyone. And most importantly, it has to be frequent. Woven into daily operations, not a quarterly award, a generic, great job message, just. It lacks the power to build any real connection.
And it seems like recognition builds connection in multiple directions at the same time, doesn't it?
It does. When peers give each other kudos on an internal platform, that builds powerful horizontal connections. That's trust and morale across the team. And when managers recognize their direct reports, that builds vertical trust and belonging. It signals that leadership actually sees and values the individual. It's a system for reinforcing visibility.
And this is where technology stops being a barrier and really becomes the great enabler, especially for dispersed teams. You simply cannot manage frequent, specific, values-aligned recognition manually. It's impossible.
Precisely. Technology, like a modern recognition platform, makes this all systematic and scalable. It lets you use customizable digital badges tied directly to your company values. It creates a peer-to-peer acknowledgement feed that's visible to the whole organization. And it automates those celebrations for work anniversaries and birthdays, making sure those moments are never missed, no matter the time zone. This is how you institutionalize appreciation.
So what does this all mean for the bottom line? We've talked a lot about relationships, but leaders need to know this investment translates to hard results. So what does this all mean?
Connection is directly tied to the fundamental metrics of business resilience. The biggest impact is on retention. The research here is really compelling. 63% of employees who receive meaningful recognition at least monthly say they rarely, if ever, think about leaving their jobs. That sense of belonging, it provides this powerful emotional barrier against recruiters and outside opportunities.
And improved retention obviously saves a ton of money, but what about the day-to-day, the impact on performance and productivity?
Connected teams are just. They're more productive. It's that straightforward. They communicate better. They eliminate duplicated effort because they trust each other enough to ask for help early. And they solve complex problems faster because they feel safe enough to collaborate and share ideas openly. Connection is the glue. It's the internal adhesive that strengthens the culture and makes hybrid work actually work.
Okay, let's talk implementation. Because 10 strategies can sound like a massive project for an already stressed out HR team. If you had to pick the single most feasible starting point for, say, a mid-sized company, what does the data suggest? Is it recognition or is it training managers?
The data definitely points to recognition as the fastest lever you can pull for connection. But, and this is a big but, the long-term success relies completely on the second point, training your managers. You have to start by assessing your current state. Survey your employees on belonging, on psychological safety. Analyze your recognition patterns to see which teams are already strong and which are weak. But the crucial next step is targeted leadership training.
And let's be really specific about what kind of training we mean. We're not talking about compliance training here, are we?
Oh, absolutely not. No. This is skills-based relational training. Organizations have to Train managers and leaders, specifically on these connection-building practices. How to run an inclusive hybrid meeting. How to build psychological safety in a virtual one-on-one. How to practice consistent, values-aligned recognition. These skills are often not intuitive. And structured training, combined with some accountability, ensures leaders are actively building connection, not just leaving it to chance.
Then you monitor, you measure, you iterate, you track the KPIs, recognition frequency, engagement scores, trends and turnover data over time, and you use that data to keep refining the strategy.
Exactly. It has to be a continuous cycle, not a one-and-done project.
So to recap for you, building employee connection in this hybrid world, it demands intentional design. You have to move beyond accidental interactions to structured social moments, mentorship, and transparent mobile-first communication. Psychological safety is the absolute cultural prerequisite that allows those relationships to form without fear. And recognition. Recognition is the engine, with frequent, specific, monthly appreciation being the benchmark for measurably stronger connections and ultimately higher retention.
The shift is complete. It's irreversible. Connection is no longer just a perk or a nice to have. It is the fundamental component that makes an organization attractive, resilient, and competitive in today's talent market. The advantage now lies in building a culture where everyone doesn't just feel safe and valued, but where they feel they fundamentally belong. So given everything we've unpacked today, knowing the power of frequency and specificity, what is one small specific connection-building action you will initiate with your team this week?